Good evening, Soars. How is everyone tonight? Thank you for joining us as we cover our voter engagement toolkit. We are so grateful that you have joined us as we continue strengthening our collective voice and preparing for impactful advocacy at the Capitol. Tonight's session will equip you with practical tools, clear strategies, and the confidence to lead voter engagement efforts in your chapters and communities. Although she is unable to be with us tonight, Madam Regional Director Tiffany Moore Russell Esquire sends a warm virtual greeting that we will view momentarily. She encourages us to stay tuned in with this toolkit and to exemplify service and sisterhood through civic engagement. We also want to acknowledge our Florida Connection and Social Action Committee Chairman, Doris Richard Mitchell, who is not present this evening due to the recent loss of her father. She sends her love and support, and we ask that you keep her and her family in your continued prayers during this difficult time. We have a robust and purposeful agenda prepared for you tonight, one designed to strengthen your advocacy skills and ensure that you are fully equipped for our days at the Capitol. Thank you for your commitment, your leadership, and your unwavering dedication to this work. We will now view Madam Regional Director's virtual greeting, followed by meditation and prayer by Dr. Sharon Miller.
Hello, Soras. This is Sora Tiffany Moore Russell, your South Atlantic Regional Director. Unfortunately, I will not be with you all this evening virtually, as today is my birthday, and I am spending this evening with my family. However, I want to thank you all so much for joining us tonight as we prepare to train, get ourselves ready to head to Tallahassee for the 2026 Florida AKA Day at the Capitol. There are a lot of big issues that will be on the agenda for Florida in 2026. Two of them that come to mind is one, the attempt of the Republican legislature to redraw the congressional districts, and two, there are several proposals to eliminate property taxes. So, Soros, it is important that we learn, we engage, and we're plugged in and prepared to head to Tallahassee for the Florida AKA Day at the Capitol. I know tonight is going to be impactful, so sit back, take great notes, and a huge thank you to your leadership team and my leadership team for putting this together. And I want to acknowledge the Florida South Carolina Connection and Social Action Chairman, Sarah Doris Mitchell. Thank you for your leadership and all the Soros who are working diligently and hard to make this successful AKA Day at the Capitol. So again, Soros, thank you all for joining us and have a great session tonight.
Good evening, Soros. I want to reiterate something that Sarah Tammy shared with you during her introduction. Please keep Sarah Doris Mitchell, Chairman of the Florida Connection and Social Action Committee, and her family on your prayer list. She lost her father this past week. My sisters, my sorors, we are the vision that slaves saw as they labored and toiled in the fields and houses, and their labor and vision created a pressure that has helped to change the landscape for our people. And more importantly, we have an obligation to continue to create pressure that changes things for the people. In 1865, the slave's vision gave rise to the Freedmen's Bureau, a financial institution that was designed to help freed slaves stand up economically and educationally. The Freedmen's Bureau was weakened and dismantled because the intention of unifying separated slaves' families and providing a financial and education footing was too much of a threat to the existing government. In spite of its demise, Hampton, Howard, Fisk, Morehouse, Spelman, Wilberforce, Talladega, the forerunners of the HBCUs emerged, the vision that slaves saw. Another pressure point It was at Howard University in 1908 that the slave's vision was further actualized. 16 courageous women of color decided to extend the slave's vision by incorporating a sisterhood. The organization is still thriving, promoting equality and justice for the people of color and creating points of change, the vision that slaves saw. Yet another pressure point, December 1st, 1955 to December 20th, 1956, the colored citizens of Montgomery, Alabama demanded justice and equal access to the city's transportation system. They refused to board the city buses, but rather chose to walk in the heat, the cold, the rain, and maybe even snow to further their call for justice. Their vision, tenacity, and courage broke the financial infrastructure of that system, the vision that slaves saw. The slaves' visionary pressure continued into 1963 with the March on Washington, led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The march intensified the pressure that produced the Voters' Rights Act of 1965. In 2008, fourth generation freed men and women saw the election of an African American to the highest political position in our country, President Barack Obama. The culmination of yet another pressure point and an actualization of the vision that slaves held. My sisters, my sorors, what kind of pressure will we exert in this upcoming legislative cycle here in Florida and the midterm elections? Will we extend the vision that slaves saw, or will we take a pass? It is our choice to make another opportunity for God to infuse his power. I pray that those who are coming behind us will be able to see that we remain strong in the Lord and in his mighty power, and stood against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms, the vision that slaves saw. Now we will have an overview of tonight's agenda by Sir Nyla Davis, Florida AKA Day at the Capitol Awards Chairman.
Good evening. I don't know about you all, but that gave me goosebumps. That tells you what type of evening we're going to have tonight. Good evening and welcome to our Voter Engagement Toolkit webinar. We're excited to have you with us as we strengthen our collective voice and prepare for meaningful advocacy at the Capitol. Tonight's agenda will guide us through the essential tools and knowledge needed for effective civic engagement. We'll start with the Advocate for Social Justice Voter Engagement Toolkit. Then we'll have the Navigating the Election Information, Avoiding Misinformation and Disinformation, followed by our legal guidance on voter registration, rights and responsibilities of voting, Advocacy on the Hill, where we'll focus on Senate Bills 980 and 190, and House Bills 161 and 1029. No Kid Hungry advocacy tips, followed by a Q&A session, and then we'll have our closing remarks. So get your notepad, your iPads, get ready to take notes. Before I pass it on to April Freeman, I want to share that registration is now open. The awards deadline has been extended to January 13, 2026. The link to the award submission form can be found in the SAR e-news blast, but if you're unable to locate it, please email fl@gmail.com to request the link. This webinar promises to be informative and an empowering session as we prepare to lead with purpose and advocate with impact. April Freeman will now walk us through our social justice voter engagement toolkit.
Thank you so much, Nyla. We're so excited to have you all with us this evening as we dig into our voter engagement toolkit. Some of you were able to get a glimpse and access to this toolkit if you attended your cluster conference. And tonight we're going to go over it to make sure you're in tune to prepare for AK Day at the Capitol and when you return to your chapters. So you will have access to this voter engagement toolkit by scanning the QR code that you will see on the screen through the slide. So if you want to take a moment to follow through, you can scan through that, and we will be sending this link to access this in our Know Before You Go email as well. So as we dig in, let's look forward to the three main components of this toolkit. So this toolkit provides your chapters with a how-to resource for voter engagement, voter registration, and voter mobilization. These are the key areas we need to make sure that we're tuning into to make sure that we're making an impact in our communities. As we engage in AKA Day at the Capitol, there is going to be a plethora of information that we need to make sure that we are taking notes on and making sure we are putting into action in our chapters and, most importantly, our communities. As mentioned in Madam Regional Director's message, there are key issues that are taking place during this legislative cycle, and we want to make sure that we have our chucks to the ground as we engage to make sure that our communities are well versed. So as we move forward, we will see other components of this toolkit. So, as I stated before, this is your how-to resource. This is a very well thought out toolkit with very scripted information for you and gives you some wiggle room to make sure you can cater it to your chapter's needs. So for the first section under voter education, it gives us some key voter education issues that you can tap into based on the needs of your community, such as sample activities you can engage in and ways to encourage chapter members to be involved as well. At times, we know social action is not the best way to get to others when they think of doing the great work, but it is the biggest work that we can do and pretty works, as we all know. And we want to make sure that our all chapter members are engaged in this work. When we think about voter registration, that is a big topic. A lot of our community members may not be registered to vote. They may have moved. They may need to update their voter information. And we want to make sure that we get everybody to the polls. But when they get there, we want to make sure that they are able to vote. So this gives us a review of the to-do list before, during, and after voter registration. Most importantly, knowing your voter laws, the registration locations, precincts, and most importantly, we want to make sure that we're partnering with others, such as When We All Vote in Equal Ground, Florida, who have even more resources that we can tap into to make sure that we are reaching our communities in the way that we need to. As we move on, we will also see with voter mobilization. Movement is key to get voters to the polls. We must identify key voter barriers, such as language, transportation, accessibility, and sometimes even just the lack of knowledge that some voters have when it comes to voting, such as requesting your vote by mail ballots, not knowing about the different laws. And we want to make sure that all chapters are in tune with their supervisor of elections for their county to make sure they are up to date with local and state elections to make sure that all community members are well aware. Also, if you look on the slide, you'll see all of this information in the toolkit guide, such as layouts for flyers, how to impact your community, other ideas that you can engage in. So as Madam Regional Director stated, I hope you have your notepad ready because we have a lot of information to take down. Get your chapters ready because once you leave AK Day at the Capitol, we are ready to hit the ground running. So now I'm going to pass it over to Gail Andrews, who's going to give us some information on navigating election information.
Good evening, Soros. I hope we're all doing well today, this evening in particular. Did you all hear me? Okay. All right. The navigating election information and avoiding information is misinformation and disinformation is probably one of the most disturbing parts of any kind of election process because it upends everything. So I'm going to go through some of these things that we're all familiar with and have witnessed and experienced. And then, I'll highlight some things that may help in trying to make sure that you're aware of what's true and what's not, and how you can help others do this. And if you're working on projects and so forth, like educating voters and being in the field and so forth, you can help them navigate this, because this is really has become an egregious process that is used to undermine us in particular. Okay, so let's just start with this, and we'll go through it fairly quickly. Um, Knowing the difference between exaggeration and misinformation. I think some of that is relatively obvious, but this misinformation is so obvious now, and it's so embedded in everything that we do and hear and watch every day on the news and so forth, that it really upends your whole thinking about how you want to respond to certain things, how you want to vote for candidates, how you want to protect your family. And so you have to be very aware. Now, the biggest problem is with candidates when you're looking at people's credentials or trying to evaluate a candidate or an issue to find out what's true and what's not. Records, organizations, everybody really does more than exaggerate. A lot of times they just plain lie. And it's very simple. If you see something that just looks crazy, it probably is. And you need to know the resources and so forth to go to correct that and make sure you're on the right path when you're looking at these things. I put consulting firms in here because I work with a lot of consulting firms. I'm a consulting firm, but consulting firms in particular, when they're trying to do persuasion, get hired in campaigns, plain lie. And Pam could talk about that too. She experiences it also. Weaponization of opposition research and polling data dominates the election process and is ultimately the enemy of candidates and ballot initiatives. We have a polling group here in Florida that is bad. For example, it's called North Florida University. They do polling, and their polling is skewed terribly to conservatives, for example. Like, they'll come out and they'll have these crazy numbers that in the end are always proven wrong. You have to know who these people are that are doing the polling that you're looking at. You have to know how to look at polls. You need to do that background and research yourself. If you have a poll that only, you look at it in what we call a universe, you see it's only got 500 people that they're polling, that's not a good poll. Anything over 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 in what we call a universe. In other words, all the people, Democrats, Republicans, gay people, Black people, white people, Hispanic people, those are legitimate. You have to look for that kind of thing. And it's kind of interesting. It should be fun for you to take a look at some of this stuff sometimes about how this all works. When we talk about weaponization of information in opposition research and so forth, the best example was with Kamala Harris in her campaign. We all remember the video where they have the soundbite. They have her sitting there saying that, we had to provide operations for transgender folks that are in prison. Now, right away, we knew, oh my God, that's it, right? And that undermined her, but it was taken out of context. We have many things that are taken out of context. Understand and know that is what happens quite a bit. And then you have to do your homework again and research the entire conversation to make sure we understand what it is and convey that to other people. The situation we had with Florida's abortion law and the constitutional amendment for example, and the controversy right now over Governor DeSantis, his wife, and there's a grand jury investigating how they took state money and they actually spent it basically on political commercials and tried to guise them as PSAs, where people are talking about you can get an abortion in Florida, that was out of context. So this is the kind of thing you have to look for. And like I said, if it looks like it's crazy or wrong, it probably is. Just do your research. Know the difference between misinformation versus persuasion. Misinformation obviously is lies and things taken out of context. Persuasion is, and most lobbyists know this, when you take the facts and you use those facts to persuade someone to come to your side. And we do it with commercials and so forth. We do it with messaging about certain issues that we want to persuade, but we do not lie. Okay, you do not lie. So be careful when you're hearing this stuff and try to understand and make sure you just check stuff. If it looks really shaky, take a look at it. What you can do, clarify for yourself, simple research with credible resources. Okay, what are credible resources? Newspapers, the New York Times, the Tallahassee Democrat, your television news stations, other credible media are foundational in trying to find out what the truth is. Google is very good. ChatGPT sometimes is good, sometimes it isn't. But you can verify things through these credible resources. Some people don't think MS or MSNBC is a credible resource, and some people don't think that Fox is credible. So you need to find a mainstream media that is considered credible. And again, these are all these different news venues also that are reporting facts. When making your point, be clear and concise. When you're having these discussions with people, and we talk about it all the time. We're talking to people all the time about Trump, about DeSantis. I mean, politically, we're talking about people because these people, it's not like it used to be 10 years ago. These people are impacting our lives. And so it's very important that we understand the seriousness of what they're doing and saying. Look what happened with the poor woman that was killed by an ICE agent. They started calling her what? a domestic terrorist. I mean, and you're sitting there looking at this saying, wow, look at the White House website. All of that is propaganda, and most of it is not true. So this is weaponization of the worst kind. So we need to be very aware of how serious this is and understand that your ability to educate people with the facts can help us just end this division that is really, really undermining the country. And quite frankly, of course, it hurts people of color more than anybody else because it's targeting us. When challenging an issue on social media, go to the reliable sources, as we've discussed. You can also comment. If you want to do pushback, it's very hard nowadays unless you have a huge following on social media, you have a podcast, but you can still do your part in your community, and you're really almost obligated to. You can still write to your newspaper. You can write a column. You can have your own podcast. You can respond and bring up issues on social media and venues that you're familiar with. You can even do your own TikTok. You'd be surprised how impactful these are. Now candidates are using them, but just make sure you're very aware of what you're talking about. And if you get into any of these skirmishes with people who are extremely passionate and overzealous, back away because it's not worth the stress, the mental stress and duress. I think that do not argue, condescend. These are obvious things on social media or with groups and individuals. Be content knowing that you're telling the truth and that's on the record. And as I said, do not be afraid to voice your opinion. You have a right to it, free speech, but just make sure that you have the facts, because all the gaslighting that's going on and the gross distortions are really undermining our ability to even speak out on things that are obviously bad. But always remember that as long as we continue to tell the truth, we'll win the day. And I think all this will change very soon. So I don't know if I made any sense to y'all, but I hope that's helpful.
Good evening, everyone, and many thanks for the invitation to speak about voter registration this evening. I am Pamela Birch Fort, and I'll be talking to you about voter registration. I want to note that we often speak of voting and voter registration as an act of civic participation, and indeed it is. But we live in a very different environment today, an environment that requires us to step up and step into perhaps what is a new attitude. I want to make you aware that voting today is actually an act of resistance. We step into the voting booth to vote because we're mad as hell and we want change. Since the passage of the 1965 Voting Rights Act that allowed for massive numbers of Black people to vote in the South, there's been an active process to keep us from voting. Now that there's a supermajority in the Florida legislature, they want to remain in power. Under the DeSantis administration, there's been a voter suppression measure enacted practically every year. Let me share with you a few numbers. The voting population in the state of Florida is 13,468,885 individuals. Those registered as Republicans are 5,522,833. Those individuals registered as Democrats are 4,108,884. Those with no party affiliation are 3,381,443. The fastest growing voter registration demographic being no party affiliates. In 2023, Senate Bill 7050 was enacted that makes it virtually impossible to act as a third-party voter registration organization as you are usually accustomed to, because simple mistakes can lead to excessive fines and in some instances criminal penalties. But all is not lost. Let's talk this evening for a few things that we can do to help Floridians with voter registration. So before you engage in this process, there are three things that you really need to know first. You can no longer collect or handle paper voter registration forms from anyone except your spouse, your child, or parent. Collecting a paper voter registration application, even from your best friend, can risk heavy fines. You must know the criteria for registering to vote. You must be a United States citizen. Green card holders are not citizens and are not eligible to register. You must be at least 18 years old, a Florida resident, not adjudicated mentally incapacitated with respect to voting unless you have had your voting rights restored. And you cannot register to vote as a convicted felon unless you have had your voting rights restored. The deadline to register to vote is 29 days before the election day. You can register someone after that deadline, but those individuals will not be able to vote until the next election. Let's move to the next slide. Helping people to register to vote online. This is probably the best and the fastest and most efficient way to register our friends and neighbors to vote, especially if they have a Florida driver license or Florida voter ID card issued by the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles. No matter where you live in the state of Florida, you can use the online portal to register or to update your voter registration information. Applicants can visit this portal on their own phone, tablet, or computer, or I get asked this a lot, you can let them use your phone, your tablet, or your computer to register. If they use your phone, tablet, or computer, your information, your phone number, your email address, is not transmitted anywhere. It is only the information that the applicant places into the form that is transmitted. So you don't have to be concerned that any of your personal information is transmitted at this time if they're using your phone. The online portal system will walk you through point for point how to complete the process. Applicants registering online must have either a Florida driver's license, a Florida state ID card, or the last four digits of your social security number. Next slide, please. Helping people to register to vote who don't have a Florida driver's license or ID card. You can still register these individuals by using a paper form. So, to be eligible, voters have to fill out this form and mail it into their county supervisor of elections or to the Florida Division of Elections. So, individuals can print out blank voter registration forms, or you can access forms from your supervisor of election or the Division of Election. But you have to remember, you can only hand out the paper form. You cannot collect the form or handle the form. And yes, you can distribute envelopes with stamps to individuals. Using a paper form, the applicant must directly turn in the form or mail the form themselves. You can drop off these forms, the applicant can drop off these forms at any public library, supervisor of elections office, or to any one of the government offices that accept voter registration applications. Many individuals are unaware that you can register to vote or leave your paper form at all public libraries, at any county supervisor of elections office, at any Florida driver license office, like your tax collector office, or any of the government offices that provide public assistance, such as food stamps or Medicaid, or any government offices that serve persons with disabilities, such as the Division of Blind Services in the Department of Education. You can also leave your voter registration form in any military recruitment office. There are some key points. Next slide, please. There are some key points that you must know about using a paper form. You must use blue or black ink. Please, no paper, no pencils or other pen colors. You must complete lines 1 through 6 and line 15 in order for the form to be completed. Lines 1, 2, and 3, these are the check boxes wherein you confirm that you're eligible to vote. You must complete the check boxes. There are other lines. Line 4 and 5 relate to including your date of birth and your ID numbers, or the last four of your social security. Line 6 requires you to put a residential street address, not a post office box, to register to vote. And line 15 is where you sign and date. And you must sign it and you must date it. If it is not signed and dated, the form will not be completed. Next slide, please. You must know the eligibility information. If someone is not sure about whether they are eligible to vote, please, please do not counsel them and do not make suggestions which may or may not be correct. There are organizations and there are processes that can help an individual to determine whether in fact they are eligible to vote. It is illegal to submit false information on a voter registration application. So never encourage an individual to register to vote if they are unsure of their eligibility. And now I'd like to pass the mic over to my friend and my comrade, Cecile Schoon, who will speak about restoration of rights and also respond to some of these eligibility concerns. Cecile?
Thank you so much, Pamela. Good evening, everybody. It's a great honor and pleasure to be able to talk with you this evening with the other stores and bring some facts and suggestions and guidelines to you. Next slide. Many of us were deeply involved with the campaign to get Amendment 4, the restoration of voting rights of persons with felonies, passed. First, we had to get people to sign petitions to put the issue on the ballot, and then we had to vote yes. And we had a resounding success, as many of you remember, in 2018. Unfortunately, though, shortly after our great success, the legislators intentionally passed a law, Senate Bill 7066, which required payment of all fines fees before person to vote. In the sense they said that was part of the completion of the sentence. What most people understood a completion of sentence to be is when you're done with your incarceration. And problems with the issue is that the records were not kept with that in mind. Records for fines and fees have not been well kept, and many people couldn't pay the fines and fees. And so the boxes of the records would go to the probation office. It would be here, there. There've been fires, mold, mildew, hurricanes. Those records have not been well maintained. So when the legislators tied paying all your fines and fees as the only way that you could register to vote to prove that, they almost set up an impossibility because many records were not maintained that well. Despite that, the governor had decided that he is going to try to enforce these laws. And even if someone mistakenly thought that they could vote, they're going to prosecute them. And we all remember the governor standing with many, many law enforcement beside him, and the helicopter with a SWAT getting the grandfather, out of his bed at 4:00 in the morning. Really, reprehensible treatment, in my opinion, trying to scare people into not voting. So what can we do about it? Next slide. So there are some provisions of Senate Bill 7066 that do allow individuals to take action and try to determine whether they can vote or not. And one of them is, in that statute, there's authority to go back into court and to ask the judge to modify your sentence so that you can vote. Now, this is a new concept because sometimes sentences entered 30 years ago, but there is a provision to allow you to do that. The courts are particularly interested in modifying depending on the disability of the returning citizen, their age. Have they been contributing to the community? Have they rehabilitated themselves? Do they have difficulty getting work? Those are the things that the courts are looking at to modify a sentence. Or sometimes what they'll do is they say, well, you're a deacon in the church, so I'm going to consider your volunteer work in the church to be community service that can reduce your fines. So that is a possibility. There is also a possibility of asking the state itself at the Division of Elections for an advisory opinion. Can I vote? And that process allows you to fill out a form and submit the records that you think you have with your sentence to the state. And then here's a new thing. They're going to tell you whether you can vote or not in 90 days. This is a new development that the League of Women Voters, Florida Restoration of Rights Coalition, and others worked really hard to get them to give a set answer within a set amount of time. Prior to that, people were waiting 2 and 3 and 4 years with no answer. So it's a big improvement in an answer within 9 days. There's that link there that I think will be shared with all of you later with the slides, but it's the Division of Elections. That's how you use the advisory opinion process. Next slide. The other thing is when you go to court, usually when you go to court, that is something that requires a lawyer. And the League of Women Voters has created a Florida Bar approved continuing legal education for lawyers, and we're offering it for free. And the lawyer would get 5.5 hours of credit, continuing legal education credit. And we're generally required to have 30 plus hours every 3 to 4 years to get that, to maintain our licenses. So what the league has said is we're going to help you learn how to help people to go into court and ask the judge to modify the sentence so they can vote. But we're not going to charge you for the training, which might have cost $600 to $1,500. But in return, please, lawyer, would you consider offering pro bono services to some of the returning citizens? And the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, FRRC, and Desmond Meade, they also have a program, and there's the link that they use and their phone number. And I saw that Sora Pamela also mentioned them. So you can go to them, and their process, they will assist also returning citizens to be able to get a court order that authorizes persons to be able to vote again. Also, something that's been going on for a while, but we have our state representatives and our state senators. They realize that the big problem is the state does not have a data system where an individual, a returning citizen, or any citizen could look their name up and say, do I have any unpaid fines? Is my sentence complete? Because when people have been sentenced 30 years ago, the records haven't been maintained, they surprise you. But the average person doesn't remember all the details. When I speak, just to have this here, I was so time. I was condoning my family. I was too upset to remember all the details. And so a lot of times people get back on their feet, and that happens a few years later when they're able to work their way out of the problems of having a felony conviction. So therefore, they are not often, they don't have the records and they don't have the memory. So it is important to be able to go back to the records themselves. So Senator Polsky, with Bill 0132, titled Restoration of Voting Rights, and Senator, I believe, Felicia Robinson with House Bill 73, they have asked for a data system to be created to facilitate people looking up their records. And wouldn't that be great? Because then people would know for sure, have I paid all of my fines and fees, instead of scratching their heads and being afraid to vote. Next slide, please. So what can we do? We can ask our lawyer friends to sign up with the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition to assist with their sentence modifications, and take the League Continuing Legal Education and volunteer with the League for pro bono legal services for returning citizens. And you can let other people know that these opportunities are available. We can also try to reach and connect with reentry programs that are in the community to see what kind of services they provide returning citizens. And we can sort of see, is there a way that FRRC or the League can work directly with that reentry program so that we can scale up our ability to have people get the answers to whether they can vote or not, or register to vote. We can also support the legislation that we mentioned about the creation of the state database. And maybe that's something we could do and speak to our representatives when we are, all the AKAs are there for our day at the Capitol. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to turn the microphone over to Sora Janine Wester, and she will be introducing some of our legislators.
Sorry, Janine, you're muted.
Thank you. A big, huge pink and green thank you to my fellow league member, Ann Sora Cecile Scoons. Good evening, Soras. We're honored to welcome our AKA legislators who are championing key bills that directly impact the communities we serve. As part of our focus on advocacy on the Hill, they will share insight on Senate Bill 534 and 190, as well as House Bill 161 and 1029. Critical legislation shaping food security, education, and food well-being in Florida. Please join me in recognizing our legislative partners whose leadership and commitment makes our collective advocacy possible. The high energy of Senator Rosalind Osgood of District 32 will provide insight into Senate Bill 534. Senator Barbara Sharif of District 35 will present Senate Bill 190, and Representative Yvonne Henson, District 21, will discuss both her champion bill to the Senate Bill 190 and the House Bill 1029. Okay, Sarah Rosalind, it's on you.
Thank you, Sarah Janine. Good evening, Sarah. And if you all would indulge me for about 30 seconds, I would be remiss if I didn't ask us to pause for a moment of silence for the late Honorable Geraldine Thompson, Senator, Florida House member and Senator for a very long time. Can we have that moment of silence for our Ivy Beyond the Wall at this time? Thank you. And I am excited to be here this afternoon. I am a proud member of this committee, South Atlantic Region, and the Zeta Rho Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, a chapter that has produced 3 state senators in the person of former Senator Muriel Mandy Dawson, Senator Barbara Sharif, and yours truly, Senator Rosalind Osgood. Liberation theology begins with the foundational conviction. God stands with the poor, the hungry, and those pushed to the margins by unjust systems. Hunger is never simply about stomachs. It's about power, access, and whose lives are deemed worthy of care. When college students, especially low-income students, first-generation scholars, and students attending HBCUs are forced to choose between education and eating, the failure is not personal. It is structural, moral, yes, and political. This truth resonates so deeply with the historic mission of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. In a few days, we'll celebrate 118 years of being supreme in service to all mankind. Our commitment to service, justice, and advocacy has long centered the needs of the underserved community. From our founding, the sorority has understood education, health, and economic stability as inseparable from justice itself. So addressing hunger, particularly among students thriving for upward mobility, is not just charity, it is our work of liberation. Federal economic decisions, including the One Big Brutal Bill, Tax Cut and Jobs Acts of 2017, reshape the conditions under which students pursue higher education. While not technically designed as an education or a food policy, this bill intensified financial strain on low and moderate income families, leaving many students more vulnerable by prioritizing tax relief for corporations and high-income households, leaving many of our students with less family support and higher out-of-the-pocket costs. As living expenses continue to rise and financial aid fails to keep pace, students, especially those who are Pell Grant eligible, first generation, or attending HBCUs, are forced to work more hours, skip meals, and rely on campus food pantries. This bill also contributes to political climate that made access to safety net programs like SNAP more difficult and more stigmatizing. So the result has been a quiet but extremely devastating rise in campus hunger and the normalization of colleges acting as emergency social service providers. So into the scene steps Florida Senate Bill 534, the Hunger Free Campus Act, sponsored by Senator Mac Bernard from West Palm Beach and co-sponsored by yours truly, Senator Rosalind Osgood. This bill is our response rooted in justice. It names hunger as not as an individual failure, but as a public responsibility. In this sense, this bill aligns a faith-informed, justice-driven ethic long championed by our sorority. It's basic, meeting human need while challenging the system that created it. Nationally, about 23% of undergraduate and 12% of graduate students report experiencing food insecurity, not having enough to eat, which translates to more than 4 million college students nationwide who struggle with hunger. By extension, if Florida follows similar national trends, 10,000 of Florida students are likely experiencing food insecurity. Multiple studies have indicated that roughly 30 to 40% of students report some level of food insecurity, meaning 1 in 3 students often do not have consistent access to enough food. At some Florida campuses, student surveys have shown similar statistics, while appropriately 1 in 3 students report the same statistic of food insecurity. One academic study at the university in Southeast found about 36% of students were food insecure, far higher than the Florida population food insecurity rate. So as we think about this data and we think about what's going on, it forms the argument for the necessity of Florida Senate Bill 534. This bill has a equity focused process of selection. This bill proposes to select 3 campuses with the highest percentage of Pell Grant eligible students for this pilot program. It also engages a level of institutional responsibilities. It requires campuses to establish hunger task force with student representation. It also requires campuses to dedicate staff to assist students with SNAP enrollment and with education. It also requires that food pantries on campuses are free food pantries and that free food must be available for these students. It has a provision to give meal credit donation programs or meal vouchers. They're required in this bill so that all students, whether they have money or not, they can have access to food. Campuses must also conduct hunger surveys and submit best practice reports. And then they are required within a year of the program starting, if it starts July 2026, by January 2028, they have to report to the governor and the legislator what their findings were. And at that point, the legislators will enact a statewide evaluation of what we call an APAGA study to come up with a system-wide study and policy recommendations. You know, we have to kind of build a bench because the goal of this bill is to do a pilot so that we can measure and then we can scale it across the state with funding from the state. So Senate Bill 534 is important because it names hunger as public injustice, not just a personal failure. It reframes hunger as a policy issue, placing responsibilities not only on the institutions, but also on the state. It centers the most vulnerable, particularly low income, first generation working students and students of color. It links hunger to student success, acknowledging the impacts of retention, mental health, and academic performance, how they all trend downward when children don't have access to food. It replaces charity with the complete infrastructure. This is not just a one-off. This bill is designed to build an infrastructure, a sustainable system, rather than just our campuses relying on a simple food drive here and there. And it also demands data and accountability, because if we're spending taxpayers' dollars, we want to measure and show what we're doing with the money and the results we're getting. So it ensures that this crisis is not only measured, but it's also addressed. So it kind of creates this blueprint for this statewide transformation, not just a Band-Aid or a temporary fix. In the time we're living in 2026, public policy must intentionally be designed to change infrastructure. So rather than just having ad hoc food drives, campuses will now, because of the old big brutal bill, has forced them to become quasi-social service agencies. What Senator Bernard and I are saying with this bill is we want the state to support and fund and help our colleges as they enroll our students in SNAP, make sure that they have access and free food on campus at all times if they are hungry. So it shifts this away from a one-off emergency response to a foundation of groundwork that will lead to statewide expansion so that we can address this problem. And you know me, most of y'all know I come with a whole lot to the table. So I think about this, it's very personal for me. In my Christian tradition, hunger is not an abstraction. Jesus taught his followers to pray for daily bread, not symbolic nourishment. And he consistently challenged systems that allowed abundance for some and deprivation for others. So liberation theology reminds us that justice is incomplete when people are educated but unfed, enrolled but malnourished, credentialed but exhausted, just trying to survive one day at a time. Senate Bill 534 represents, for me personally, more than just a pilot program. It is a moral intervention. It acknowledges that education without nourishment is, yes, exploitation, that equity without access is an illusion, and that excellence without justice is very hollow. So, by shifting responsibility from ad hoc charity to institutional accountability, this bill aims that hunger on a college campus is not inevitable, it is addressed. We don't want it to continue, Saraz. So let me give you a quick example. Florida A&M University, my beloved FAMU, and many of yours, we all know about Beta Alpha chapter, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. It has a food pantry. Maybe you knew that, and maybe you didn't. Those of you that work there, you probably knew that. But the food pantry is only open 2 hours on Monday, and then Tuesday through Thursday is open 4 hours. The school is already making a good faith effort to meet these needs of our students, but it's not sustainable because they don't have funding from the state and they don't have the necessary data. So this bill will help them do that. So in the spirit of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated's enduring legacy of advocacy and service, Senate Bill 534 calls Florida to live into a higher, more standards, one where students are not asked to sacrifice their health for their education, and where the pursuit of knowledge is matched by a commitment to human dignity. Students cannot thrive where hunger persists. Justice demands more, and our solution is Senate Bill 534. We ask for your support of this bill. We look forward to seeing you at AKA Day at the Capitol. We will have a press conference on the 27th at 12:30 around this bill, and we want to make sure that as Purdy is working, that we're advocating and we're standing up for human dignity and for our young people. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Osgood. That was so informative. Saras, I bring to you the quiet yet mighty Senator Barbara Sharif, this energetic and determined Representative Yvonne Henson, who will provide updates on Senate Bill 190 and House Bill 1029. Saras?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Good evening. This is Senator Dr. Barbara Sharif here. And I wanted to come to you tonight to talk a little bit about the bill that I am carrying with Representative and Soror Yvonne Henson. We have Senate Bill 190, which the title of it is the Perimenopause and Menopause Policy Committee Bill as amended. What SB 190 does as amended is it establishes a temporary perimenopause and menopause policy committee under the state surgeon general. The amendment strengthens the bill by adding executive oversight, legislative appointments, clear duties, reporting requirements, and a sunset period. The committee's role is to review the data, identify standards of care, and examine emerging treatments and develop an evidence-based educational campaign. This is about improving public understanding and health outcomes for women, and it's not about creating a new bureaucracy. And the Department of Health came in after we filed this bill and said that they were going to support this bill as amended, and they are going to actually create this working group so that we can help women out there who are suffering with menopause and perimenopause symptoms to understand what they are, and also to educate men as well about the symptoms. This is great because it comes with a full-time person to oversee the committee. It'll come with a committee of professionals that the Department of Health will help to choose and manage. And I wanted to give a few statistics tonight. in regards to the population of women that we would help with this bill. So in Florida, we have a population of 22.6 million people, and roughly 51% of those are women. That equates to about 4.63 million Floridians that are age 45 to 64 that fall in our menopause and transition bracket. These population breakdowns for the state of Florida are as follows. There's about 1.4 million women aged 45 to 54. There's 1.56 million women aged 55 to 64. So when we talk about perimenopause and menopause, and we talk about the prevalence of the patterns, there are women that begin in their mid 40s that typically around age 45 to 47 years old, they start to have these symptoms. And in a national survey that we've looked at, it says that women who are experiencing these symptoms, they start off kind of slow, and many women don't really know what they are because they're experiencing these changes and they're not 100% sure. So women go to the emergency room for anxiety or palpitations. And they're saying, hey, I'm having anxiety, or I'm having heart palpitations, or I'm feeling dizzy. And they don't necessarily have hot flashes, which is one of the telltale signs of perimenopause and menopause, is the uncontrollable sweating. These are the basal reactions that women have. But what happens is that they start to see physicians and nurse practitioners more frequently because they're having symptoms that are a direct result of perimenopause and menopause, and they are not understanding why. And so this bill will allow us to create this work group and focus on all of these symptoms. And what the Department of Health has committed is that they will put dollars behind an advertising campaign once the work group is finished with assessing and evaluating all of the symptoms and all of the things that can happen to women experiencing these. They're going to develop a public campaign and put dollars behind educating everybody in the public. That includes men, because men need to know why you're biting their head off and why they need to stop bothering you at certain times, and why they need to understand what we're going through and be more sympathetic. Because I know there's a lot of men out there that they'll look at their wife and they'll say, she's 50 now and we've been married for 30 years and she's just not tolerating my stuff. Well, guess what? We can't tolerate your stuff because we're experiencing a whole bunch of other stuff and our bodies are changing. And so to help to kind of bridge that gap in education and understanding, the Department of Health say, yes, we're going to do this. But even further than that, for those of us who are in the medical profession, who practice on a daily basis, I've been to 34 years in. I have a family medicine practice. I'm a doctor of nursing practice and a nurse practitioner. I'm autonomous, so I practice independently. What we were taught in school was that prescribing bioidentical hormone replacement therapy for women was dangerous, and that there were cardiovascular and cancer risks that were associated with that. In November of last year, they said, well, we don't want to continue this because it's been proven that the benefits of women taking these hormone replacements far outweigh the risk, and the risk on that was proven to be very minimal. So what happened? On November the 10th of 2025, the black box warning for menopause and perimenopause hormone replacement supplements was lifted. What does that mean? That means that a whole bunch of us who are out there practicing, who were taught to prescribe these things cautiously, now have to get into prescribing them. Women who need them now need to know that it is okay to take them, even with cardiac disease, even with diabetes, even with obesity. It is now okay to take them because for a long time, it was something that was banned. So what is happening? So as a result of that, the Department of Health said, look, this bill is very timely and we want to support it. And so at this point in time, that's what SB 190 on the Senate side is about. and its companion bill that Representative Henson is carrying, which is, I think hers is.
It's HB 161. Thank you so much, Dr.
161.
Sharif, for explaining it so well, because I did not sit in on that Department of Health meeting. But I brought this bill to Dr. Sharif because I knew of her expertise in medical practice. So many of my peers and my sorors and my friends are experiencing problems that are related to perimenopause and menopause, as I had had it. So I wanted to find a way to make it real. My sorors, today we stand at the edge of a long ignored truth. Menopause is a universal chapter in the lives of more than half our population. And yet, for generations, silence has been the only policy we've had. And she told you the numbers of the women that are in this transition. It's actually another milestone in our lives. It's not a simple headache. It's something we all transition through. And a decade filled with hot flashes that steal sleep, mood shifts that shake confidence, weight changes. Let me tell you, I used to be skinny mini. I don't know what's happening to me. And it feels like a betrayal to our body, the health risks that climb even as support systems fail us. But the greatest burden is not the symptoms. It is the stigma that tells women they must endure quietly. It is the ignorance that leaves clinicians unprepared. It is the policy vacuum that treats a major life stage like a minor headache. And it is the workplace cost, where nearly half of our women report impairment every week, and too many consider leaving jobs that they have poured their talent and lives into. Menopause is not a whisper. It is a national public health issue. It's an economic issue, and it's a human rights issue. And today we're saying no more. We want women. We will no longer let women lose 20% of their bone density before anyone thinks to check your bone density. Why do you think we're having so many hip replacements and knee replacements? We refuse to let heart disease, stroke, breast cancer, sleep loss, and mental health challenges be dismissed as just part of the change. We refuse to tolerate a healthcare system where many clinicians never received adequate training on menopause, and where fear, confusion, or outdated interpretations of old studies keep women from treatments that could transform their lives. Dr. Sharif was very clear in explaining how some women need that hormone replacement therapy, and it is good for them. Not all of us, but many of us. We refuse to let the women who make up nearly 30% of America's workforce suffer in silence while productivity slips, confidence wanes, and our economy loses $1.8 billion every year, all because no one bothered to make menopause a workplace priority. The National Menopause Foundation has drawn a line in the sand, and we hope to replicate some of the work that they've done. The Women's Midlife Health Policy Institute has made the agenda clear. And now it's time for us, all of us really, to turn that agenda into action. We need awareness. All women and men need a national awakening that educates women, employers, clinicians, families, and communities. Maybe curriculum in our schools, public campaigns that normalize, yes, normalize, talking about menopause. I said to some of the legislators at a delegation, we're bringing menopause out of the closet. We need better medical education, a modernized evidence-based menopause curriculum in every medical school. I talked to the University of Florida Medical School about this. Every residency, every continuing education program. We need updated guidance on hormone therapy and clarity from the FDA. So misinformation, it was such a great presentation by one of the speakers about misinformation. It was excellent. This has been an excellent webinar. I've been with two of them now, and so much information we're passing along. We also need insurance reform. And we need insurance that covers early bone density screening, insurance that covers lab tests, telehealth, obesity treatments, and the full spectrum of midlife care. We need policies that protect and uplift midlife women, resources for employers so they know what's going on, protections from discrimination, and recognition that supporting menopausal women is not charity, it is smart economics. This is the turning of the tide. We're here to break the silence, dismantle the stigma, and build a future in which every woman knows exactly what is happening to her body, has access to the care she needs, and never has to choose between her health and her livelihood. So let us not be apologetic. Let us be loud. Let us claim what should have been ours all along: informed care, equitable policy, and dignity at midlife and beyond. I want to thank Dr. Sharif for taking this on with me so bravely and courageously, and actually become more vigilant about it than I am. I see that you have asked me also, you have, this committee has also been pretty vigilant. I filed a bill on Thursday and you've already included it in this presentation. I didn't know it, I didn't even know it had a number yet. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it and why I did it. So the bill, I tried to get it named a motherhood initiative. I will tell you that I was the guest speaker Mother's Day at several different churches, two churches actually, and in both churches I did the same talk, and it was about if I could really honor mothers in the Florida House, this is what we should do. And somehow I ended up thinking maybe that's what I should do, a bill that honors mothers. It's called Maternal Health and Early Education. I had to Google it and pull it up so I could tell you about it because, like I said, I just filed it Thursday. Didn't know it had a number, but you guys did. You're vigilant in what you've done. So in section 1 of this bill, it says the act may be cited as the Motherhood Initiative, but they're calling it Maternal Health and Early Education. But they are at least allowing me to say the act can be cited as a Motherhood Initiative. In section 2, home visit programs for expectant mothers. The Department of Health shall expand the current home visit program to include a home visit program for expectant mothers within the Healthy Start program, which shall include Healthy Start care coordination programs. The program shall conduct screenings for expectant mothers for depression and substance abuse disorders provided by a registered nurse or licensed practical nurse, licensed under Part 1 of Chapter, that's another law. The department shall refer at-risk expectant mothers for mental health treatment, ensuring expectant mothers monitoring her blood pressure, and shall provide and review the educational materials created under another statute. Some of these statutes already exist, they're just not coordinated with the expectant mother. Include a 3-hour course on the care of a newborn, including but not limited to bathing, dressing and feeding, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and setting up sleep routines for the newborn and the mother that hospitals and birth centers shall offer to a mother before taking her infant home. Health insurance providers and Medicaid shall provide coverage for this program. In section 3, which already existed, they are amending it to say the Agency for Healthcare Administration may reduce the fees for an applicant or license under this section for birthing centers, because I want to create or eliminate barriers to organizations creating birthing centers, especially in rural and hard to reach places. And that's what that's about. Let me get back down to the next. So in section 5, I'm saying that the coverage of blood pressure monitors and cuffs, as used in this section, blood pressure monitors and cuffs means, okay, so they do a lot of definitions in there, but I'm really saying that the health department is going to provide these blood pressure devices for the expectant mothers, treat them, teach them how to do their blood pressure, show them where the dangerous levels are, what treatments exist for blood pressure, and how to get it before they become, what is that called? Preeclampsia, or whatever that word is. That's right. So in section 6, we already have a lot of trained doulas in my district. I understand that we want to get them trained across the state. And then we want doula and midwife services. As used in this section, the doula means a non-medical professional. Y'all know what a doula is. You know what a midwife is. What I want to offer is that doulas and midwives will be able to be in the hospital labor delivery room with their clients, because many expectant parents are saying they're not being treated right by the doctors. There was a midwife doctor recently died after giving childbirth, and she was the teacher of midwives at a college. It's just brutal what's going on out there. And then I moved.
Thank you, Representative
Okay.
Hanson.
All right.
There's
more, but you can go back and read the bill.
We'd like to thank all of our legislators for taking the time out to share their expertise and present their bills that shape our future, the future of our communities. Your leadership, clarity, and commitment to addressing the needs of Florida's children and families strengthen our advocacy and deepen our understanding of the work ahead. We appreciate your partnership, your dedication to ensuring that every voice is heard and every community is supported. Senator Osgood has placed her bill in the chat, and both Senator Sharif and Representative Yvonne Henson are available to answer your questions once you place them in the Q&A. Again, we thank all three of you for being here with us tonight. We really appreciate the hard work that you're doing. I now want to transition,
Can I just say one thing?
Senator Dr. Barbara Sharif would like to make a comment.
I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to really close out and just finish. If you have questions for me, medical questions, you can put them in the chat for me. And then I have one last bill, which is SB 196. It is a uterine fibroid research bill. And that bill is up as well this session. And that is just a bill that's intended to collect data on uterine fibroids, because this is a healthcare condition that affects predominantly African American and Hispanic women, majority African American, and it causes quite a bit of problems, and we end up having to get them removed, hysterectomies and that type of thing. So I just wanted you to be aware that there's two bills that I'll need your support on in the Senate, and I thank you for the time.
Thank you again, Dr. Sharice and Representative Henson and Senator Osgood. Sorry, Andrea.
Good evening. Thank you, everyone. Good evening to all of our attendees and our guests who have been on with us, and we thank you for hanging on with us. I am here to let you know who our corporate sponsors are. So our corporate sponsor is No Kid Hungry, and they are a national campaign run by Share Our Strength, a nonprofit group working to solve problems of hunger and poverty in the United States and around the world. They are here with us tonight to share advocacy strategies that will strengthen our collective impact as we soar to the midterms and educate our communities about food insecurity. Tonight we have with us from No Kid Hungry, Sky Beard. Sky is the Florida director of No Kid Hungry, and she leads statewide efforts to expand children's access to nutrition programs. She brings deep experience from her leadership in early childhood education, community partnerships, and policy advocacy. A native Floridian and UCF social work graduate, she is committed to addressing food insecurity across the state that she calls home. Also with us, we have Meredith Joris. Meredith is the Associate Director of Advocacy for No Kid Hungry, guiding strategies that connect policy and program goals to protect children's access to food. She specializes in turning complex policy issues into clear, motivating messages that drive action. Her work is grounded in the real needs and experiences of communities that she serves. And finally, we have with us Brianna Webster Campbell. She is the public health and equity focused leader with more than 20 years of experience advancing nutrition access, and educational opportunity. She directs No Kid Hungry's national training and technical assistance team, drawing on a career rooted in community-centered public health and policy work. A graduate of UNC Chapel Hill and Georgetown, she remains committed to ensuring that every child has reliable access to nutritious food. So let's welcome our corporate partner, No Kid Hungry.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome. As you mentioned, I'm Brianna Webster Campbell, and we're just so happy to be here this evening. I'd like to give greetings to Madam Regional Director in her absence, Senator Osgood, Senator Dr. Sharif, Representative Henson, and all of you for joining us tonight. And just really a special thank you to SORA's Tammy Henson, Janine Wester, Andrea Knowles, and Doris Richard Mitchell, who I know is in here as well, who we have just been working so closely with on both today's presentation and obviously leading up to the Florida Day at the Capitol. So just thank you so much for having us. And I know that you all have been sitting for a long time, so we don't have much time, so I will go ahead and move forward. So next slide, please. We can move on to the next slide as well. Thank you. So tonight we're going to start by grounding you in what No Kid Hungry is and what our partnership with the South Atlantic region really represents. We'll talk about why childhood hunger remains such an urgent issue and what it means for the children and families we aim to support in Florida and across the country. We'll walk through effective advocacy strategies that resonate, persuade, and inspire action, not just with policymakers in mind, but really anyone that you hope to impact. We'll also look at data to understand the scope of the challenge, and you'll get a clear picture of our strategy and how we approach the work specifically in Florida. We'll also explore the state's policy landscape and key food security issues facing kids and families. And finally, we'll close with specific messaging and action steps that you can take to make a meaningful impact in the fight against childhood hunger. Next slide, please. By way of background, many of you, if you were on the regional call that we did, you've seen this slide. But for those who weren't, I just wanted to let you know that our connection with the South Atlantic region really began by our long-term partner, the Denny's Foundation. We launched this collaboration last year at the regional conference by packing 1,200 chip bags, joining a press conference, and really beginning conversations with each of the 3 states within the region to talk about how we can really help support and be most helpful. So our goal across the region is really to amplify the voices of AKA members and use our collective power to connect more kids with the meals that they need, both through service and policy change. So we've also created a partnership website where you can access resources, including today's slide deck and a few other supplemental resources. Next slide. So I just want to pause on this one specific statistic. 1 in 5 kids, 14 million children, live in food insecure homes. In a nation with so much wealth, that should never be our reality. Together, we can change that. Here in Florida, and across the country. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Meredith Dorst, who will share helpful advocacy tips and strategies.
Thank you so much, Brianna. Hi, everyone. I'm Meredith Joris, the Associate Director of Advocacy for the No Kid Hungry campaign. And really, at its core, advocacy is the belief that change is achievable through raising awareness, presenting evidence and arguments for why that change should happen, and engaging with the people who have the power to make those changes. But belief alone isn't enough. Advocacy that gets results is intentional. It's planned, it's strategic, and it's rooted in understanding how change actually happens. Any advocacy that gets results typically follows a specific strategic cycle, and that's what I'd like to spend a few minutes digging into tonight. Next slide, please. And actually, next slide. Thank you. Effective advocacy really begins with understanding the problem. We always ask, what is the issue at hand? How widespread is it? What's causing it? What evidence do I have that demonstrates it? Strong research here helps define the story you'll tell later. And storytelling isn't just about emotion, it's about connecting evidence to human impact. Next, we always want to define our goals and our objectives. We want to be really crystal clear on what we want to achieve. What solution are you seeking? What does success look like? A well-defined goal will help tell you what success looks like. And then SMART objectives, so specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, will help keep your campaign focused. Next, we identify the target audience. Your primary audience is the person or the people who have the power to make the change you're seeking. And to find them, we do a couple of things. We can map the system. So we look at who sets the rules, who allocates resources, who enforces the policies related to the issue. And we look at multiple levels. We look at the local, the state, federal, and even organizational leaders. Sometimes power isn't obvious. We track influence networks, so board members, committee chairs, advisors, key staff, they can all hold real sway, even if they aren't the public face. And then we research past actions, who has supported or opposed similar policies or initiatives. Once you identify your target audience, this is where you'll want to consider what that audience cares about and who they'll actually listen to. Then build your network. Coalitions and partnerships can help amplify your message. They help demonstrate broad support and they strengthen credibility. Really not dissimilar to this partnership that we are engaging with all of you on. So this could be other organizations, this could be community groups, individuals who can mobilize supporters and open doors to decision makers. Even a small group can gain influence through strategic partnerships. Then develop your message. Effective communication underpins every successful advocacy campaign. And effective communication is tailored. So part of knowing your target audience, again, is knowing their priorities, their concerns, their interests. And using this information, you can then design targeted persuasive messages and identify the most compelling and authentic messengers who can influence them. Advocacy often works through those indirect messengers, so partners, influencers, the public, those who can sway those decision makers. And sometimes you'll need to adapt your message depending on who you're talking to, even if they aren't your ultimate target. And if, again, you joined us for the December webinar, remember the power of storytelling here. You can use storytelling to humanize the issue and also make the evidence really resonate. And then choose the right tactics. Tactics bring your strategy to life. Think about combining approaches. Obviously, you can directly engage with decision makers like you're doing later this month at your day at the Capitol, but you can also use traditional media, social media channels, and you can engage a base of supporters and organizational allies as part of some of the grassroots mobilization of your campaign. But you want to choose your tactics strategically, which reaches your target audience most effectively, which leverages your network and your resources the best, and which builds, visible momentum and credibility. And then finally, evaluate and adapt. Advocacy is not static. We always want to monitor progress. We want to measure our results against our objectives, and then, of course, adjust as needed. What's working, what isn't. I think this is one of the most critical steps, but one that is so often overlooked. So as you head into the Capitol at the end of the month, you can use this framework as a guide for how you show up that day. Your conversations are part of a larger strategy, even if that impact isn't immediately visible. And I'll also add that, we did drop that partnership webpage in the chat. So if you follow that link, we do have a resource on our advocacy priorities that my colleague Sky will talk about here shortly, that we do welcome you to use as part of any of your meetings if the issue of childhood hunger is one that you do want to advocate on. And then, of course, beyond your day at the Capitol, this same cycle that we talked about tonight applies to the issues you care about as Alpha Kappa Alpha women and in your own advocacy work. This is really a skill you can carry into any issue, into any role, or really any space where change is possible. I will turn it over now to my colleague Sky Beard.
Thanks, Meredith. Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Sky Beard, serve as your Florida director for No Kid Hungry based in Brevard County, East Central Coast. Happy to see you all and thanks again for your time. Though I am in Brevard, I do spend a lot of time walking the halls of the Capitol. So these are issues that are really important to our team across the state of Florida. And so thrilled with all of the important topics that you all are diving into, that you have interest in child hunger across the state of Florida. So just quickly, as Brianna said, I know you've been looking at Zoom boxes for a minute now. So we'll just zip through some of this, but just know we'll share our contact information at the end. Happy to have a further conversation about child hunger in Florida, since we only have a few minutes here today. But as was mentioned, the Florida statistics on child hunger are unfortunately no better than some of the national ones that Brianna shared earlier. Right now, we're looking at 1 in 5 kids across our great state living in homes where that next meal is not a guarantee. And that looks different for a lot of families and a lot of homes. Sometimes that's having to make incredibly difficult decisions. Are we going to make another stop at the grocery store so that everyone in the home can eat tonight? Or are we going to pay that electric bill? Or are we going to be able to put gas in the car? Sometimes it's parents making difficult decisions about who in the home is going to be able to eat that evening. So there is not one, classic look of child hunger, but regardless, it's difficult for many families across the state. Also recognize that there are some counties where that number is even greater, where we're looking at 1 in 3 kids living in homes where there is high levels of food insecurity. And then in other areas, it might be slightly better. But we also need to recognize that child hunger is an everywhere situation across our state. I think sometimes we have conversations with folks that think it's it's an over there problem, or it's not as bad right here in my community. And I wish that were to be true, but we need to recognize that every community has families who are doing all they can to put food on the table but are struggling. Next slide. So there are a couple policy issues that we are focusing in on across the state of Florida that we're just going to just real briefly zip through tonight. One of them is SNAP. You heard Senator Osgood mention the SNAP program and how critical that is to families who are doing everything they can, again, to feed their kids. We're going to talk about what's happening with SNAP at the federal and then therefore at the state level. An opportunity that Florida is not yet participating in called Summer EBT or Sunbucks. And then we are also incredibly passionate about other issues related to child hunger and follow along during legislative session, including campus hunger and other related issues. But we're going to focus in tonight, just for the sake of time, on SNAP and Summer EBT. Next slide. So we need to recognize that SNAP in Florida is a large-scale program. In our state, it's administered by the Department of Children and Families, with just under 3 million Floridians participating in SNAP. Over 1 million of those are households with kids. And it's a lot of money, right? It's $6.7 billion that's flowing through the state economy, spent in local retailers and grocers. So it is a large-scale program with large impact. It's one of the best tools we have in our toolbox to fight child hunger and food insecurity. And we have some challenges coming our way for the SNAP program that we just wanted to put on everybody's radar. Next slide. So in the federal bill, HR 1, that was passed last July, there were some changes made to SNAP. Some of them have to do with eligibility rules and who is going to be determined eligible for SNAP. There were some waivers in place that are no longer going to be available to some families. There's about 180 plus thousand Floridians who will be impacted by the eligibility rules that changed at the federal level, making it a little more difficult for families to access the SNAP program. One area that I wanted to just have on our radar as well is some changes in how SNAP is funded. One of those pieces is a right now conversation with session happening days away, and that is an increase, a required increase in the administrative cost of the SNAP program. That has forever, like many federal programs, been a 50-50 split between the federal government and the state. And that has now shifted to 75% of the administrative cost to be paid by states. So for Florida, it's about additional $50 million a year that the state is going to need to contribute just to operate SNAP. This is the staff and the infrastructure and the technology and all the things at the Department of Children and Families to keep the SNAP program going. So $50 million is a lot of money. However, I just want to also make sure that we are aware that for the first time, really historic changes made at the federal level that will require states to pay to share in the cost of the actual benefit amount for SNAP. That has always, again, and forever been 100% paid at the federal level. So if my family were to receive SNAP and I were to go into my local Publix or Winn-Dixie and swipe my EBT card, that now is going to be some paid by the state and some paid by the federal government. And that is a huge impact to states across the country, including Florida. You can see at the bottom of the screen there, it's anticipated that Florida will be having to pay about $1 billion annually in the cost share for SNAP. That's significant. It is an uphill challenge that we're going to have to figure out how to make that happen. And one of our concerns at No Kid Hungry is that there will be some state level policy decisions made that could drastically reduce the number of SNAP participants in the state in order to tackle that $1 billion cost share. So that is a couple fiscal years out from now, but it is a significant issue that we're going to have to grapple with. Next slide. The other program I just wanted to mention is I'm going to be hopeful and say it's a not yet program across the state of Florida. Florida is one of about 12 states that has not yet decided to opt in to a really, really important opportunity called Summer EBT, also referred as Sunbucks. We know for a lot of kiddos in our state who really rely on school meals as their primary source of nutrition, when summer comes around, it's a really difficult time for them and their families. There's a lot of great summer programs that are available, but sometimes they're difficult to access. Sometimes there's just challenges logistically getting there. And so Summer EBT would provide a grocery benefit for those summer months, $40 a child for those 3 months of summer, so that families have a little extra support during those summer months, and they can spend that at their local grocer just as they would SNAP as well. So that is an opt-in that states have in order to participate in that program. Florida has unfortunately not yet elected to do so. So it is a policy issue that we're continuing to advocate for and talk about. Next slide. And just so you see what the impact would be, we have approximately 2.2 million kids who would be eligible for summer EBT in the state of Florida. So again, large scale, significant impact to this program. It would bring $269 million in federal dollars to the state. Again, that's all federal money that flows through local businesses and local retailers. And in order to receive that $269 million, the state would need to contribute about a $12 million administrative match. So seems like a pretty good return on investment, right? We pay 12 and we get 269 million plus, of course, families have access to the program over the summer months. Next slide. So those are our two big policy issues. Again, happy to talk further about lots of intricacies about those to strategies. But just a couple things as you're going into your days at the Capitol. I will also be in Tallahassee during that time, so happy to chat with anyone as well. But we find in our work, as I'm sure you do as well, that there's just a continued need to dispel stereotypes and myths around folks who need food assistance, families who receive SNAP, families who rely on school meals for their kids. These are hardworking, really great families who are trying to do everything that they can. And sometimes we're up against other visions of families who receive those services. We just finished the month of November not too long ago, and many of you might remember the challenges with the SNAP program in November with the government shutdown, with the halting of SNAP benefits. And we have found in those conversations that really resonated with a lot of folks, with a lot of policymakers who saw firsthand the lines wrapped around parking lots and families waiting for assistance from food banks. So it really speaks to the urgency of food insecurity. And then reminding everybody that it takes all of us working together on these issues. It takes all of these programs coming together. Sometimes we are faced with, well, we have this program, so we don't need this one. Or if this program was a little better, we wouldn't need this other one. And the truth is that we need all of them in order to really come together to support the needs of families and to ensure that we do not have hungry children across the state of Florida. Next slide. And just to wrap up, we're just, as Brianna shared, just so thrilled for this partnership between our organizations. So much so that we're going to be partnering together in April at your South Atlantic Regional Conference for a workshop on storytelling around these issues. And so look for more information on that if you would like to come and partake in more conversation about this issue. There's some links on the screen that will be sent out as well for how to sign up for ongoing communication from No Kid Hungry. And then, as has been put in the chat, the partnership site as well that has lots of background and additional information on how we came to join you today for this great conversation. Next. The last one, here's our contact information. Feel free to shoot any of us an email. We're happy to have more conversation because, as is true for any advocacy topic, what we covered today just kind of scratches the surface. There's a lot more to be shared, and happy to join you today. And thank you so much for your time and hanging in past your end time to spend some a little more time with us as well. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies. We are so grateful for our partnership and thank you for sharing such valuable advocacy insights. We are glad to know that you will be in Tallahassee when we are there for the Days at the Capitol and that you will be with us at our 73rd South Atlantic Regional Conference. So thank you again. Thank you. Thank you. Are there any questions that anyone may have? We've answered a lot of the questions in our Q&A that were there.
Yes, I think all of the questions have been answered in Q&A, and then there were some questions also in the chat that were also answered. Our legislators did put into the chat information on the number of bills that they reference. So please, if you get an opportunity, just scroll through the chat and you'll see those bills.
Thank you so much, Sora Marcia. Sora Tammy?
Thank you, Soros. Let's just give it up for our amazing panelists. We thank you so much for getting us geared up and ready for our advocacy days at the Capitol. Soros, thank you for attending our Voter Engagement Toolkit webinar. We hope that we were able to get you prepared so that you are able to strengthen your advocacy. So tonight's session equipped us with practical tools that we can begin using immediately to make an impact. So at this time, I am asking you to please schedule your meetings with your state representative and senator in advance of our advocacy day on January 27th. And so I want to give you some important information here. Appointments for the 27th should be made between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m., allowing time to attend the 12:30 p.m. press conference for Senate Bill 534, Food Insecurity Pilot, sponsored by Senator Rosalind Osgood, that she gave us great information about. So I want you to go ahead and schedule your appointments immediately starting tomorrow between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. for January 27th. And then also make time for the press conference for Senate Bill 534. We will also have a reception sponsored by our AKA legislators at 3 p.m. on the 27th. And so all documents referenced during the webinar will be available on the Florida AKA Day at the Capitol website. It will be available on our landing page. And we will also include it in our upcoming Know Before You Go e-blast that will be sent to your email. We are so excited to welcome you to Tallahassee as we are tuned in and prepared to soar to the midterms. We're going to rise, lead, and vote for meaningful change as members of Alpha, Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Happy New Year, sorors. Happy 118th Founders Day, and have a good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.